Without further ado, welcome everyone to episode 29 of Amazing Authors. Today, this is a room where the bubbling over of a debut author, debut memoirist comes to light. Certainly, Liz's book is wonderful, fascinating. You get to learn more about her, and then we can move forward and ask her certain questions as to her journey to get to the published author stage. And of course, I always like to remind everybody that there's always something for everyone when you open the pages of a book, which is something that gets me excited all the time. I always take away at least something, if it's not necessarily mind altering, but this one's really a great share, really vulnerable read, and I got to tell you more about it. So this is the room where the magic happens, and you are the author. We are here to create magic through inspiration, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Amazing Authors with my Storyteller Becomes a Story Attaché, and we have today's story about Liz Kinchen and her author of Light In Bandaged Places. So it's good to bring you to this place to have the conversation today. I do want to give a little bit about your intro so people get a good idea as to who you are before we learn why you wrote what you did. So you are a writer, meditation teacher, and Buddhist practitioner. Right then and there, I need to take a deep breath because I have to. Like even the words jump off on the page for me. So anyway, you're doing your job, Liz. With a graduate degree in computer science and counseling psychology, you worked in software development management for 21 years before moving into the nonprofit sector for 17 years as the executive director of a small organization working with underserved children and families in Honduras. Her passions are her family, meditation, teaching mindfulness, spirituality, writing, talking with close friends, walking in nature. You're the contributing author to the anthology Art in a Time of Unbearable Crisis, published by She Writes Press in 2022. You live in the greater Boston area with your husband over 30 years, and you can find her blog, author page, and information about her meditation teaching at Liz, L-I-Z, Kinchen, KINCHEN.com. So good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Happy to be here.
We just came hot off the presses with you for your book. Last week was your pub date. So congratulations certainly for that. How do you feel? How's it going?
It's surreal, really. It's wonderful. I really love the opportunity to talk about the themes in my book. And yeah, so far it's been really well received.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you know, I think that I had the pleasure of blurbing your book, and certainly I'd love to share the blurb I gave because I think it really did give me a bit of a foundation as to the storyteller, and perhaps we'll sharing that with others as well. So this is my blurb of Liz's book. The memoir is a vulnerable account of the sexual abuse Kinchen, the author, suffered at the hands of a trusted middle school teacher. An important book for anyone who's suffering with brokenness from the silent shame and feelings of unworthiness. Through her honesty, she shines a light of hope as she goes through the process of bandaging the wounds of betrayal. She sparks a conversation that allowed her to heal her own darkness that will open doors for others. It's powerful and moving. Let's start off with the book, the name, The Light in the Bandaged Places, right? Why did you pick that? I always love to know the story, the origins behind the actual title.
Yeah, so I had many titles, at least 5 or 6 different titles over time. And when I came across a quote from the poet Rumi, it really struck me. And the quote is, he says, "Don't look away. Keep your gaze on the bandaged places. That's where the light enters you."
Beautiful.
And yeah, it just felt so, right on theme with what my book is about, about the trauma I experienced, the abuse, how it impacted my life, and how I healed, from it by looking at the bandaged places.
And the other thing that just jumped out on me when I read the book initially was the kintsugi. It's based in the Zen Buddhism, the practice. And, I had just heard a presentation on that before I actually read your book, but can you explain that a little bit and how that applies to this book as well, since you really did go into it at the beginning?
Right, yeah. So kintsugi is this ancient Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. So a piece of pottery breaks into many pieces, and they repair it by putting the pieces back together with gold, right? So they glue it back together basically using gold, and they do that intentionally, choosing a precious metal, because their thinking is that the repaired object is even more beautiful because of its cracks. So that too, that in the Rumi poem seemed to sort of go together well. And can I hold up my book so you can see? This is what the cover looks like, right? So you can see how the cover designers, incorporated, the suggestion of kintsugi right there in the cover.
Beautiful. I want to ask you, after I read the synopsis, because I think it's really important, the why you read the why you decided to write your book, because it's really a very vulnerable sharing that you've offered. And I think in many respects, a lot of people may initially be uncomfortable, but broken parts, right? That's where you truly shine your light. And for certain, I think it becomes very important at this point where people become vulnerable, so they shine their light. So I'm going to read your synopsis, and I'm going to let you answer that, so you can share all of the why, because I think it's really important. So Light in Bandaged Places shows us the harm done when an older man in a position of power convinces a child that sex with him is all right because he loves her. This poignant story takes us through the long-term wounding of such abuse and the multifaceted path of healing. As a lonely girl coming of age in the 1970s, Liz has every reason to believe her eighth grade teacher is in love with her because the sex isn't physically violent and is wrapped in a message of love. She learns to exchange sex for attention, but years later as an adult, emotional closeness eludes Liz. Even after marrying a sensitive, caring man, she is walled off. Struggling through confusing years, she believes something is deeply wrong with her. Healing begins when an unexpected event takes Liz back to those formative years, and she sees for the first time that what happened to her was not love but abuse, as she begins to understand how her relationship with her teacher destroyed her innocence and self-worth. She begins a spiritual and psychological journey that sets her free. Wow. Okay. So let's start unpacking that one. I do think that it's interesting because a lot of the heavier themes that come out really are kind of a way to take those things that happen out of the shadows to be spoken of, so they no longer are of shame, but of, like you said, becoming the healing in those broken places for others because they read your book. So tell me a little bit about your why.
Yeah, my why. So I didn't start out writing this to even be a book. I started writing almost 20 years ago, actually, in order to help me recall events from the past. So it was suggested to me by my therapist, actually, that writing could help me uncover things that I had locked away. So it started that way. And then over time, I just kept writing because I just found the joy in writing itself. And so I just sort of continued my story, of how those early years and that relationship impacted a lot of struggle that I had with relationship in my later life. So when I noticed that there actually is a story here, that there's a narrative arc that has a hopeful message, that a person can learn and heal from traumatic experiences. I thought maybe this is a message, a story that others might resonate with and might find hope for themselves, perhaps, wherever they might be along their own journey. So yeah, once I got to that sort of realization, like, oh, maybe I have something here that could benefit others, I thought, okay, now I'm going to try to put it in the world.
Awesome. But this is your first journey as a published author. This is your debut. Right. So, it's interesting because you started off as journaling, and now that you have a published it's kind of been a trajectory, not necessarily knowing what was going to become of this to now, standing there, with this beautiful, wonderful story that you've decided to share with the world. Tell me, when did you decide, say, this is going to be like a memoir? I'm going to publish this.
Yeah. So when I got to that sort of middle stage that I described, it was like, oh, I enjoy writing, and I just continued. I just generated a lot of words on the page. So I called it a memoir in a very loose sense, but it wasn't until maybe, I want to say 5 years ago, I said, okay, I'm going to get serious about this. And I hired a developmental editor. I gave her, my, too many words, and worked with her over the course of a year. She was really, wonderful and super helpful. And she helped me take all of that and really pull out the essential message, right? So that was a fabulous process for me. And at the end of that, I thought, okay, now I have something to work with, right? And then I got copy edited, and I took all kinds of writing classes and craft, and I read every book on memoir I had done that years ago, actually, started reading about memoir. So yeah, about 5 years ago, I got serious about wanting to turn it into an actual memoir with all of the, structural components that a memoir calls for, and try to see if I could put it in the world.
Oh, wow. So, I know that it's a long journey, especially when the week's coming up too, right? You're like, oh my gosh, and the nerves and everything. I'm sure in your world, Zen Buddhism the Zen Buddhism has a component that help you calm your nerves. Has there been like any kind of tips that you would have for would-be published authors to be, the kind of get you over that, so that where you are right now is actually smiling? Smiling.
Yeah. Well, I've been a meditator my whole life, so it's very familiar to me. And it is, for me and for many people, exactly what you say. It's a source of becoming centered and grounded, in ourselves, aware of where we are and who we are and our surroundings, aware of what's going on around us, and particularly what's going on inside of us, right? And so meditation is a wonderful resource for being able to, calm a busy runaway mind, calm a pounding heart. There are actual specific, techniques, in meditation to help, just calm down and be present.
I love that. I know there's so much coming at us nowadays that to be present in, and sometimes, especially when you're telling a story like yours, it could be kind of an opportunity to really examine those feelings that you had, certainly when you were writing about it, that, that may have been triggered again, coming back into your life. And then, that's the beauty of memoir, by sharing your pain, you heal another. And I really do believe that your book will do that. What are your hopes and dreams for this continued journey?
Yeah. My intention, as I was saying, for putting it in the world. I started writing it just sort of for me, right? Turning it into a memoir and putting it in the world is another thing. So my hopes and dreams for this book is exactly that it can somehow help other people. That is my intention with it. And so the more I can connect it to other people who might find it helpful, the better. So, but like what we're doing right now, making it known, to people who might be listening, and any other, venues that I can find, and connect with to help me tell the story. That's sort of my hope and dream for the next phase here.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing that now it's kind of your calling card, you know? It's an opportunity for you to expand that wonderful healing that you've been able to embody internally, because you have. After reading the book, I saw a lot of components, certainly with the who you are, you know, coming out. So there must be some favorite moments that you had while you were, working through this process. Perhaps you can share that with us today.
Favorite moments working through the process of my healing or of writing the book?
Everything. I mean, it's the whole kit and caboodle. You have everything here. And I know, hold the book up again so everyone can see that beautiful cover as well. Even the blue is very soothing. The light in the bandaged places. It really is. And I love that you have that wonderful, the gold with the kintsugi. So basically you show that the beautiful art that one can be, even though they may feel broken or in a rut or that to that effect. So there's got to be, even making the cover, I don't know, something like that with regard to these favorite moments. I always say you got to find joy even throughout everything. Life is, we do work hard, we put effort. We wouldn't have a gorgeous book right now if you didn't. But what are your favorite moments in the process?
In the process, I think a favorite moment is when I hired the developmental editor, and she came back with, all kinds of suggestions, I mean, they don't rewrite things, they just offer suggestions. I loved it. I absolutely loved it that someone paid that close attention,
cool.
To what I had given her, and really turned it into, took what I had there, and, it's kind of like chiseled away all of the stuff that wasn't necessary, and it allowed like the real story to emerge. Like, what was it? They talk about how Michelangelo carved, like the
cool.
statue was in there all along. He just removed all the stuff, that wasn't necessary. And so I feel like that's what my editor did for me, and I was so joyful.
That's beautiful. I think the really cool thing is, like, for anyone who's listening, the whole process, the takeaways that we have along the journey. But I wanted to point out, I believe today is a National Day of Mindfulness, which I think is perfect that we're having this conversation today, and all the wonderful things that you bring to the table now, especially how they could help others who are dealing with, challenges to their mental health or toward higher or better wellness. Certainly exploring those areas in your life that you may have just thought that were no big deal, get past it, buck up, move on. Talking to someone like you, or even reading your book, the Light In Bandaged Places, can help that person give themselves permission to take a look and not feel shame. Excuse me. So I would love to know for you, what would be those takeaways that you have from this whole journey? It's just started. You just published last week, but even so, there's wonderful things to offer to people who may be wanting to share their story as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I really like about Buddhism is, well, I like many things about it. So it's very invitational in its nature. It's like, hey, here are some teachings, here are some things to try, really just try them out, and see how you relate to them, what works, what doesn't work. So I like that gentle invitational approach. And I also like, underlying everything in Buddhism is the theme of compassion.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Compassion for others, compassion for ourselves. And when going through a healing process, having the ability to offer some kindness, some gentleness to yourself in that process is really, really helpful. The other thing about Buddhism that was so helpful to me, and remains helpful every single day of my life, is that it really does invite us to look at what's hard. Look at what's going on, look at our fear, look at our sadness, look at all of those things. And that's how we can become free. If we don't look at them And sometimes it's overwhelming and we need to, you know, take our time, right? But being able to look into the things that we suffer with and work with them with compassion towards them. You know, I always like how Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a well-known Buddhist teacher, talks about working with difficult emotions, like fear, let's say. He says, you know, look deeply into it and hold it in your arms the way you might hold a baby, you know, a baby who's upset, you know.
Beautiful. That is right, because you give yourself that kind of grace that you would, you know, you would give someone else to be.
Yes. Right.
Oh, there's another author. Her name is Stacey Greason. She's wonderful, and she also has explored the beautiful world of Buddhism and the whole notion of, you know, accepting the acceptance component. You know, where you are, how you are on the journey. I would love to connect you to. I think you'd have tons. Yeah, for sure. But let's go back to talking about your beauty and your beautiful book, The Light in the Bandaged Places. I want to learn more about, I feel that this is really kind of huge for me, is that before I read a book, I love to know about the author. And that's why I do these shows, Amazing Authors, because it truly is the author's story that I'm buying into. You're so wonderfully likable, and you have this beautiful, like, look at you, you have a beautiful presence where it's really peaceful. So people who are seeking peace in their life, I definitely encourage you to contact, I mean, there's ways we can contact Liz Kinchen so that you can basically start perhaps a different journey in your own life, maybe toward finding what she has found, so she can share that message with all of you. Is there somewhere that they can go to find you?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me, the best place really, is my website, which is lizkinchen.com. And there I have a lot of resources. I have a page that lists all kinds of books about mindfulness, about Buddhism, about working with trauma, about really any angle, you know, on this, and also different retreat centers and things like that. So resources, right? I also have some of my guided meditations.
Oh, awesome.
Audio, yeah. Both audio, although I've been really busy with the book. I have to add more to it, but there are a handful of them there now. And I also have a YouTube channel, which there are videos of guided meditations and small little talks on my YouTube channel, which you can get to from my website. And then I have a blog that I write maybe twice a month or so. And it's usually, you know, a reflection on something in my life that I tie to the teachings of Buddhism. So I'd like to make it sort of real and relatable.
So
like the other day.
What is it about? The most recent blog you've written, what is it about?
Yeah. So the most recent, I wrote a blog about this hornet's nest that appeared in the corner of our garage. So we had to get rid of it. It was a sad thing because I don't want to have to kill hornets, but they were buzzing around, and anytime we went in and out of the garage, right? So we had to get rid of it. So I had somebody come by, and he treated it and knocked it down, and he said, you know, they might come back and try to rebuild, you know. And sure enough, like within 5 hours, you know, I saw the little hornets up there, you know, buzzing away, rebuilding, right? And so it just made me reflect, you know, on how we sometimes in our lives, you know, just ruminate, right? Like we go back, we go over and over and over and over, and we're like just driven, right? Like blinders on, this is what I need to do, right? And, you know, we get owned sometimes by those kinds of thoughts that can rule our day or our life even. And, you know, how there's a way out of that, you know, and that these teachings kind of offer a way to relax that grip, you know, of blind single-mindedness, you know, that causes us to miss out on everything else.
Well, I definitely want to go back to your book right now, because in this respect, rebuilding, right? You had a significant traumatic event that continued for many years in your book with regard to the teacher that you got involved with. And you were very young at the time. And I'm not going to spoil, no spoiler, but, keeping in mind, the whole rebuilding process and your awareness component, I'd love to know for you what kind of, I don't want to say advice, but kind of guidance, because that's really what you are now. Someone who offers meditations, perhaps guidance to people who might be going through something similar, and also, what they can find in your book that would help them really start the process toward healing.
So trauma is, it's very prevalent, to one degree or another. And it needs to be honored, and treated with respect. Trauma lives in our bodies. It lives in our nervous system, long after a traumatic event has passed. And like in my case, it kind of ruled my life, and it impacted relationships, marriages, that I was in. So, it's powerful, and one needs to treat it with respect. And so I would always suggest that if someone really wants to work through and process some trauma, that they find a professional, a therapist to work with. It's really difficult to do this on your own. And that was instrumental for me in my healing process, was to work with someone who was particularly trained in trauma and abuse.
Wow.
So I think that's really key, is to get help, to get support, and that is actually a movement towards health and well-being, right? I know the stigma attached to seeking therapy is loosening, its grip a bit, which is wonderful currently. And there's no shame. In fact, it is an indication of strength, that one knows when they need to get professional input, someone to walk with you, and help you, guide you along the way.
I love that. I told long ago that we're not really walking this planet, this earth alone. We're always walking with others, and it's more powerful when we do reach out for the help when we need it. It's certainly something that you learned from your story, that you did in fact reach out and discover perhaps ways that you can start feeling in a different light. And I love the Light in Bandaged Places. It's wonderful. So tell me, what is your next focus, and where do you want to take this party now? I mean, I imagine you're open to book clubs and certain, in-person events. You're in Boston, so that might be an easier component, but, online, perhaps, on Zoom, is there kind of, opportunities to do that? Well, tell us, what is your next step on this journey?
Well, I have a few bookstore events lined up over the next couple of months. So I'm looking forward to that, to meeting people and talking with them. And I really enjoy that. I would love to work with book clubs. I think my book is particularly good for a book club. In fact, at the back of my book, I have questions, designed for book clubs. I'm going to soon put them on my website now that it's published. I mean, I just would love to connect with people about this, share my story, hear their stories. So podcasts, virtual events, I'm open to all of it. It's not always easy, to make those things happen, to find the opportunity. So I've always kind of got my ears open for what might be possible, and asking people to also connect me with, opportunities. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the short term. And
oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I teach meditation classes, and I've put together a course that I'm going to offer, particularly focused on how mindfulness and compassion can help with healing trauma. So I'm going to do an in-person workshop on November 18th, it's a Saturday, in the Boston area, in person, but I'm also going to offer it online in January, so for 4 Monday or Tuesday evenings in January. So anyway, that's all on my website. So if people are interested.
Liz Kinchen, LIZKINCHEN.com. And go check it out, because I think that these would be really awesome opportunities to, if you're actually considering sneaking help, maybe to get like kind of an intro, and just, she's so wonderful. Just to see you and be in your presence and feel, you know, the gold coming off of you, certainly, you know, like your book. I loved asking this question because it really is. I look for the joy. Like, I'm always looking for, you know, what makes these so much fun, what makes you so much fun, and also, you know, what people can remember you by. So if we were talking in a group, if we're not there, what would you want people to say about you? I always say, well, is there like something that like a mantra, maybe you know, a tagline you would want them to be like, oh, Liz, yes.
Oh, that's a good question. You know, sometimes I'm asked, you know, what are some key takeaways I would want people to take away from this book? And there are two. And one of them is kind of specific to the book and the themes in the book. And one of them is, you know, what you're getting at, kind of like, what's my tagline, right? So the first one is just about raising awareness and trying to shift the culture around these kinds of relationships, you know, whether it's with a young teenager like it was with me, or, you know, even with older people where there's a power dynamic at play. Just to change the culture about that. You know, there's been too much looking the other way, you know, too much protecting a perpetrator. And just, I think, not enough understanding that this is not only difficult for a person while it's happening, but it has lasting impact, right? And I think that that's not always looked at or talked about as much, is how does this actually change a person's life, right? So that's the first takeaway, is just to raise consciousness about it. And the second one, and I guess this is what would more like a tagline, I guess, that I want people to take away, is that healing is possible. It's possible for all of us. And that healing is also, you know, it's a lifelong process.
Yes,
you know,
yes, it is.
I mean, it's not a once and done, you know, it rarely is anyway, right?
I just read I read a recent quote about, it's from Buckminster Fuller, saying that I have to basically, you know, in the end of my life, relearn everything that, you know, I don't need anymore, that I choose to have in my life, you know, rather than what's been forced upon me. But back to your point, you know, that healing is possible is so powerful. It's so incredibly powerful. Go back to you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'm not sure. About it being a lifelong process, right? And so that's not actually bad news, right? Because life continues and we continue, and life changes and we change. And so it's normal and natural that things that we are healing from evolve as well, right? So it's, you know, I feel really healed, you know, enough that I'm a very different person now than I was before. I mean, the fact that I'm here doing this with you, I never would have dreamed, you know, that I would do something. So I have changed a lot, and it's ongoing. And I will say that particularly with trauma, you know, there are things that trigger, right, people to, you know, re-experience the physical and emotional impacts of trauma, you know, long after it's gone. And, you know, triggers, whether it's about trauma, big trauma, or, you know, just normal things we struggle with in our lives, those events don't stop, right? I mean, we don't stop getting reminded of something that's painful. We don't stop feeling fear sometimes. We don't stop feeling sadness or anger sometimes. I mean, these are all part of being human, right? Yeah. But what we can do differently is relate to those things differently, right? So, instead of them overwhelming us and really running our lives, we can learn how to establish a different relationship when a trigger happens, so that we are not, spiraling, maybe like we were accustomed to, in early days.
Well, that's awesome. I do agree. I like the permission to be human. I'm doing a course in the applied happiness study. That's one of the most important things in life, is to give yourself permission to be human and feel all the feels, experience all the emotions, and the external do impact you, and actually to process them, like you're saying, is really important to the healing process, which I say amen to your lifelong healing process. So hold up your book again so everyone gets to see your beautiful cover. Usually I do it, but
you have to ignore all my little post-its. These are excerpts that sometimes I read. Okay, there it is.
Everybody, go get your copy, available wherever books are sold. Is there a specific place that you're sending people to buy the book, or is it?
I'd like to encourage people to support their local bookstores, if possible. I think that would be terrific. It is available anywhere books are sold. If a bookstore doesn't have it right on the shelf, they can order it and get it within, a day or two.
Wonderful.
So it's available in print and in ebook, and also audiobook.
Audios. So that was a good question. I'm glad you brought up the audio. I wanted to ask you, were you the one who narrated, or did someone else narrate it for you?
I narrated it myself. And I have to say, I didn't know what to expect about that. I thought it would be difficult. And I loved it. I mean, it was the process of doing that, going into the studio and kind of immersing myself, with the words. And it was like a joyful experience for me.
Wonderful. Oh, that would be one of your favorite experiences then, with regard. Yeah,
that's right.
Some people say they dread it and they don't want to do the audio in their own voice, but I'm so glad, because I think with memoir specifically, to hear it being read by the person who went through it is even more profound. And nowadays people grab the audio all the time just to listen to it as they go here, there, and everywhere, not being very present, but yet they could actually appreciate, a book on the journey wherever they're traveling to. So absolutely go out and get Liz's book on the audio, hear it by her own voice, as she reads her story and brings you through those very challenging or very, traumatic times to her light again. So thank you so much today for offering us this time to talk about your book, Light in Bandaged Places, but also sharing who you are, because I really do believe that many, especially with memoir, I love to learn about the authors, and for you to share your story and also share this time with us and about yourself, I think it's really impactful, because I always do believe books change lives. They really can. And if they resonate with your story or resonate with you, the healing process can't even begin. And that would be the biggest gift I think anyone could give to another person, is to be seen, to be heard, and actually go to her. Oh my gosh, I wish I lived in Boston. Go to your wonderful presentation and experience it firsthand with her. And I think that's going to be an amazing opportunity. So you said in November and then in January online. So opportunity. Yep. I encourage all of you. I'll give you the final word, Liz. What shall you say to everyone today?
Oh my goodness. My final word is a thank you. It's a thank you to you, Meg, for inviting me to do this and sharing and being with me in this conversation. It's a thank you to those people who are listening. And yeah, just know that healing is possible.
Love it. Know that healing's possible. And remember, great writing stirs our emotions. It makes us feel, as authors who are vulnerable, to the extent truly are changing the world. So I thank you, Liz, for doing that, for being the change in this world that we all want to see. Keep making a difference with your words that get us all to think. And thank you for this. Closes out episode 29 of Amazing Authors. Thank you, guys. And thank you all. And have an incredible, a wonderful, amazing day. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.